right. Thanks, Sean. Hey, everybody. Hope you can make time for 6 o'clock at the office to meet with Sean and others. Thank you, Sean, for sharing that. It's good for us to know what's going on, and especially what was shared with you directly makes it all the more, I think, important for us to respond. So we're back into the book of Mark, chapter 7. If you have a Bible, turn there. If you don't have a Bible, you can share one of ours on the table in the back or one next to you. You just force the person next to you to be warm and friendly. You could just do that, okay? Stare at them until they respond. Now, here we go. Mark chapter 7. This whole time going through Mark, especially in chapter 7, Jesus is, as Mark reveals through Jesus' words, Jesus is continually bringing us back to this idea of a new kingdom approach to everything that really changes everything. The way that we think, the way that we see things, the way that we live. His kingdom smashes to pieces the old ways, the old traditions, the old approaches to religion, to God, to relationships. All of that is being turned upside down. When Jesus says, really your problem is you and not someone else, the problem comes from within you instead of being imposed onto you, that is a radical new way of thinking. In fact, here's how he says it. Mark 7, verse 15, here we go. There is nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him, but the things that come out of a person are what defile them, that makes them impure, in other words. That was the discussion that we looked at a couple weeks ago. Very different than the standard approach then, and even the standard approach today. So, for example, I'm talking to a gal this past week in a coffee shop. She was very outspoken. She shared how she is a part of a volunteering at an elementary school in Burnsville and the different cultures and languages that she comes in contact with as she's in as she's volunteering there at the school. And here's how she put it. She was expressing her frustration with those different cultures and languages, and I'm kind of okay. Where is this going? You know, she's got my attention here. What is really the issue? So the kind of at the peak of her frustration, she says this: someone has to teach them this stuff. In other words, the way that they don't get along, the way that they treat each other in a nasty way, and I don't know what age level. I know it's elementary school. I'm assuming it was lower elementary, but I don't know that for sure. But just in the peak of her frustration, and all these bad things these kids do to each other, somebody's got to teach them this stuff, right? In other words, it's got to be somebody else from the inside. Their bad parents, their bad neighborhood, the bad movies, the bad Emoji movie they go see, so I got one response. The other issues, the video games, the bad people, right? There's always something else going on. So there is some validity to that idea, that thinking, but then, just let's continue that thinking, right? These other people that are kind of creating these or influencing these children to make them bad people. Well, who's the teacher of that other kid? And if that kid's problem is, okay, we'll say the majority of their problem is their parent, all right? So who's the teacher of that parent? We can go around and around and around with always blaming somebody else. We can easily do that. We can justify our own issues because really it's X fault, right? Fill in the blank. It's their fault. You can do that for a while, but it eventually comes down to somebody, right? Jesus is saying that somebody is you. The real issue is what comes out of me. So there is, in the marketplace of ideas, we just need to, basically what is accepted or what's the mainstream idea in our culture is just love yourself because you're basically good. And if you love yourself enough, you can, overcome all the other calamities and problems that are, you're being bombarded with. And Jesus says, no, it's actually the opposite. Yeah, there's bad stuff going on. That has an influence. There's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, there is enough pouring out of your heart that's the problem. You don't need to spend time or even bother with trying to blame somebody else. Look at yourself, because you really aren't basically good. You're basically sinful. That's the issue. And that just keeps erupting in different ways and different forms. That is contrary to what is mainstream in the popular place, the marketplace of ideas. It was in Jesus' day, and it is today still. Jesus says the real culprit is your own heart. So if that's true, there are all sorts of implications and ramifications of that kind of thinking. And Jesus takes us directly into that in Mark chapter 7. The original Testament laws, so if I'm going back to his day, first century especially, all those laws handed down from God to Moses to the people, they need to be reinterpreted. How? In light of who Jesus is. Jesus doesn't come to abolish it. He's not contrary to it. He takes it and fulfills it in who he is and in what he's teaching. So that changes in the light of who Jesus is, in his kingdom, in his new way of kingdom thinking. That changes everything. The food in Jesus' day, the food laws, they need to be reinterpreted in the light of Jesus, because food going in can't make you unclean. Again, it's what comes out of you. Just push a little bit further. The ethnic, cultural, racial differences in Jesus' day and in our day, that also needs to go away in this new kingdom. People are people. There is no longer any dividing line or wall. That's another idea that Paul fleshes out in the New Testament. The wall's gone. The barrier is destroyed in this new kingdom. There isn't one person, Jew or Gentile or anybody, that is any better than anyone else. That is a radical distinction to make in the new kingdom, in the first century and in the 21st century, in many places today. The wall's down. People are people. Anyone with a humble heart, like we saw with the Gentile woman last week, anyone who has a humble heart that says, I don't even deserve the crumbs from the table, yet I get you, Jesus. Anyone who realizes it's their heart, anyone who comes before Jesus in that frame of mind and heart is welcomed in. That's the beauty of the gospel and what Jesus is talking about as the outflowing of this new kingdom that Jesus has come to establish. But there are more barriers that need to come down. So it's fascinating how Mark begins this, fleshing out this implication, this new idea, this new way of thinking. He begins with this Gentile woman that we looked at last week, and then he moves on to this man. That's a passage for this morning, this man who has what we would consider to have special needs, okay? So what we're going to do is consider this account within the bigger picture of how Jesus' kingdom changes how we view special needs and what the gospel at work does to change everyone and everyone's needs. So let me give you a definition here. Special needs is a term used in clinical, diagnostic, and functional development to describe individuals who require assistance for disabilities that may be medical, mental, or psychological. Those needs affect every age in the whole range, and those needs may be plain to see or not. They may be severe, requiring a lot of help and assistance, or they may be so minor, they may be imperceivable by most people. So to use this, I think this is a good definition, but we're going to use it in the broadest sense possible when we talk about special needs this morning, which then applies to millions of people within our own country. So we'll talk about that in a couple of moments. So let's read the passage, Mark chapter 7, beginning with verse 31. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment. and they begged him to lay his hand on him. And taking him aside from the crowd privately, he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. And Jesus charged them to tell no one. But the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, He has done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute to speak. Okay, rather short account, huge implications for us this morning. There are a number of ways that believers, that Christians, that scholars even, interpret these verses. A number of different ways you can go when it comes to healing and the miraculous and how does God work and so forth. So to give us just a little bit of perspective, we're going to do a little Bible study time here, and I'm going to use a chart. Oh, man. You don't get charts every Sunday, okay? So this Sunday, it's a special Sunday. Here we go. So, that's a whole lot of stuff. So I'll break it down, and we'll do one line at a time, okay? I just mentioned a number of different ways that people try to interpret. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what those different ways look like. The first way that people interpret is by metaphor, or it's more of a metaphorical understanding. So the emphasis in that way of understanding is the fulfillment of God's plan to address and heal our spiritual needs. So when someone reads that passage, they may conclude that, oh, Jesus touches his ears, and Jesus then takes some spit from his tongue and touches his tongue. That's a metaphor for the fact that spiritually he could not hear, and spiritually he had nothing to say, no way to praise God, and so forth. Okay? So that's one way, one preference. The weakness is there is, I believe, at least, an unintended indifference to the immediate needs of others. You can spend so much time talking about metaphor and think you've learned something great and go home and not care about anybody else around you. Is that possible? Yeah, because I've got more up here and nothing's happening here. Another way to interpret is solely focusing or emphasizing the miraculous. That Jesus' kingdom reality, the reality of his kingdom, involves the healing of all special needs, and I would add one word, now. That there's some who read accounts of miraculous and understand that Jesus has brought a new kingdom reality, and so therefore, this account doesn't just describe one situation that happened. It really is meant to be understood as this is how Jesus treats everyone all the time. Those who are truly his disciples, those who are truly following him, that have truly been changed by him. Now here's the weakness. It fails to consider those who aren't healed miraculously. What do you do with those who have prayed for the miracle and they don't receive the miracle? That gets to be a little tricky. Then you have to kind of judge their position with Christ and assume certain things about their heart and so forth. Another interpretation is the progressive one. The emphasis there is on us, on our responsibility. So we are the ones to bring change to alleviate suffering now and everywhere. Now, the weakness to that is addressing the gospel and spiritual needs are neglected or assumed. It's kind of like the opposite of seeing metaphors everywhere. Yeah, maybe there's something spiritual about that. But the point is this: we need to go out and do something and do it now. The emphasis, like I said, is on me. So, here's where we're going to land this morning. Because I think there are certain points with all three of those interpretations that we need to keep in mind. So I'm not going to take the spiritual baby and throw it out with the bathwater, okay, to use some kind of weird metaphor. What we're going to do is figure out where we really should be falling, and this is the fourth one. And I've called it this: the good old-fashioned, gospel-centered evangelicalism in the way of Jesus as a part of and because of his rule. All right? There's nothing complicated about that at all, right? Now, when you see the word evangelical in the media or in print, what is it usually referring to? Or how is it usually used? Anybody want to throw it out? A negative. Yep. What is it usually connected to? Conservatives. And because of that, it's a whole group of what? A political group, right? So when you hear, especially around voting time, or especially a major federal level election, you'll hear the commentators talk about the evangelical vote, right? Have you heard that? I've heard it so many times I want to puke in an explosive way out of my face. That's what I want to do. It is a gross misuse of the word. So, we're not using it in that way. There will be no puke flying out of my face. What we're going to do is go back to really where that word started from, which is to help us to understand that it's God's truth. It is revealed God's plan for us to understand right now, and it involves really all three of those, at least in a way, at least a portion of that. We're not throwing the baby out of the bathwater. We're going to understand it as best as we can. The problem, the only weakness, is we don't like to spend time thinking, for the most part. Well, and we prefer, it doesn't appeal to or satisfy personal preferences. We prefer one of the others. Let's just have this scenario happen. I'm done with it. And Christianity is and has always been a thinking man or woman's religion. It always has been. We've got to take the time to dig down a little bit deeper to understand in fullness really what the gospel is about and what this passage is about. So there are elements of metaphor that we need to pay attention to. There's real miraculous stuff going on that we can't ignore or deny, and we have to do something with that. And there is something that progressively we need to respond to in light of what Jesus is doing with this man with special needs. So I hope that helps it make sense. So, here's what good old-fashioned, gospel-centered evangelicalism in the way of Jesus as a part of and because of his rule looks like. Number one, the gospel opens our eyes, ears, and minds in more ways than one. So as we dig a little bit deeper, that's what we're going to discover this morning. So Jesus is traveling around. He travels to a predominantly Gentile region again. Okay, so he's already pushing the barriers here. He's spending time with people that the Jews normally would not spend time with. It's a region near Galilee, and he's introduced to a man with special needs. We don't know the attitude of the people that bring him. So we'll go into that in a little bit here and what could be the possibility. But we do know this. Mark tells us that he's deaf and he's mute. He's unable to speak. And right away, Mark links something extremely important that is metaphorical predominantly, but not just metaphorical. So he uses a word that connects us to that passage in Isaiah that Mary read, and she did an outstanding job. No problems with that, Mary, thank you. She had to read I made her read the whole chapter, because there's no part of that chapter we could just cut out without losing the full significance as the prophet begins to speak. So here's what Mark is doing. There is a word, and it's used twice in the Bible. Mark uses it in this chapter because the only other time it is used in the Septuagint, the LXX, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew, that's why it's the same word. Anyway, only one other time it's used, and it's in Isaiah chapter 35. So it's like Mark is saying, cross-reference this. Don't lose track of what's going on here. You have to pay attention to this. That's what Mark is saying by using that one word that's only been used twice. So he takes us back to Isaiah. And here's where that word is used. I don't know why this is going line by line. I screwed something up this morning. Sorry, everybody. This is really annoying, and it's all my fault. Okay, so there we go. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute sing for joy. For waters break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. It's a beautiful chapter, isn't it? That's just one little snippet of it. It's poetic in nature. And Isaiah is telling us what's going to happen when the king returns. What is going to be established at that moment and then into forever, when God comes back. And so he's speaking to the people of Israel. He's trying to encourage them. He's telling them that all this bad stuff is going to go away, and all this miraculous stuff is going to happen when God returns. So there is metaphor in there that not everybody in Israel would realize, okay? So there is a way that when God comes back metaphorically, our eyes are going to be open to his truth. Okay? Mark wants us to catch that in this event. That if God can heal this guy, if he has the power to restore hearing and to give this guy speech, that is a stamp of authenticity to the ministry of Jesus. There is no denying if he has the power to do these miracles, then he has the power to do greater miracles in every person. The eyes to be open, to not just see physically, but to see eternity in this kingdom perspective. To hear, to really hear. Remember what Mark says? As he repeats Jesus, he who has ears, let him hear. Not just hear physically, like this guy gets to do. Whoa, awesome. But he gets to hear with his heart. He gets to understand something that not everybody gets to understand. That's the true miracle. That's the ultimate miracle that Jesus is performing. So Mark points us back. I mean, you can't miss it. The neon light screaming and shining and beckoning us to come back to see that for everyone, what the prophet spoke of is happening. We are seeing it. It is being unveiled, the mystery and the longing. It's all coming true in this Jesus guy. So, Mark screams at us that there is metaphor, yep, but don't forget this. Jesus gives hearing, ultimately not so this guy can just hear for a few years, because you know what? He's going to get older, and he might just lose his hearing again. Well, that stinks. But it's age, and that's life, right? So it's not just about his physical hearing. He gives hearing so that he can hear the gospel. But here's the progressive side of it. Jesus gives us hearing so that we can also hear the need and be aware of the needs around us, especially the special needs around us. Because to know the truth means to act on it. So we will get into that in just a few moments. So that's the first one. Second one is this. The gospel treats you like a person who, by the way, is in need of a miracle. So let's look at that. Jesus treats this guy as an individual. To be deaf and to be mute is to be cursed and sinful and cast out from society. It would have been at least that indifferent, if not outright cruel. So we don't know the attitude of those bringing him, but here's my guess. Maybe there was somebody in that crowd that brought him to Jesus that really cared for this guy, but my guess is the majority feeling is Jesus is in town, let's see what he does. We've heard the stories, and whether we care about this guy or not, let's bring him out and see what happens. What are they looking for? They're looking for the miracle show, and he's the miracle worker. I think that's what's going on. They bring him out to Jesus, and what does Jesus do? Does he give them a show because of this guy? Absolutely not. So that's why I think they're kind of looking for that. Because Jesus doesn't always take people aside when he does miracles, but in this situation he does. What else is going on? Well, if he's always been shamed, maybe he's been ridiculed for most of his life. It could have been that bad. What does Jesus do? He sees him and he takes him aside. This is not a show. I am not doing this to impress everybody. I don't need to. And on top of that, he wants to treat this man as not a thing, but as an individual with need. So he takes him aside. There's no longer any crowd, and he begins to communicate with him directly. How? He uses sign language. He knows the language that this man needs, and that's what he uses. He reaches out and touches his ears. There is something that he's communicating that I'm going to do something for you, and it has to do with these. What else does he do? He reaches in, takes some spit from his own tongue, and touches that guy's tongue. Now, Jesus heals and does the miraculous in all sorts of different ways. Why does he do that? Because it's not a miracle show. You can't just repeat what's going on and, ooh, wow. It's not about that. It's about the individual. It's about this person who has that immediate individual need. No one else is looking at him as far as we know. So he's communicating, I'm going to do for you what you need right now that really only Jesus can do. And then Jesus does the miracle. All of a sudden, he can hear and he can speak. What's going on with that? There's the reality of the miracle. So, by the way, speaking of miracle shows, what else Jesus shows us in this passage is so important. If you've ever seen anyone making miracles into a show, you have to immediately question what's going on, because Jesus never does that. Never. Never in Mark or any of the Gospels do we get any feeling that, hey, I'm about to do something, so everybody come near and watch me do it. The severe depth of his humility would not allow that. And as he tells the people in this passage, now don't tell anyone, which is repeated numerous times throughout the Gospels, he doesn't want the fame and the spotlight in what he's doing, because that detracts and confuses people takes them away from the kingdom and gospel purpose of his ministry. If anyone tries to do miracles to gain a crowd, the spotlight's on them, it is no longer on Jesus. There's no sharing. You just can't. Jesus isn't in that spotlight. That is reason enough, no matter what else is going on. That's reason enough to believe that this is not authentic in what God is doing in his part of his kingdom. Okay? So just on a side point. So wait, there's more. There's more. Go back to verse 34 here. Jesus takes him aside. He does what I just said. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. Jesus looks to heaven and sighs. What's metaphorically interesting about this? There's a ton that's interesting about this. So he's healing the man. There's different ways to understand what that word means. It could be groaning. Some translations, that's what I'm trying to say. Some translations use the word groan or sigh, complain strongly. One interpreter says a deep sigh of engagement. Okay? So it's a tricky word to understand. I'm landing on that one because I think that does the best job. It's just one word, but in English, many times Bible language, Bible speak, you have to use many words to try to grasp at the depth of the significance of what's going on. So Jesus makes this noise that is a deep sigh of engagement. What did Isaiah say in chapter 35 when the king comes back? It'll be a day of vengeance. What's the first thing you think of when you hear day of vengeance? Destruction, right? Army, conquering, bloodletting, I don't know. Vengeance sounds cruel and awful. So kind of our minds and our thinking goes that direction, but Jesus doesn't go that direction. The day of vengeance at the beginning of the return, the beginning of the establishment of his kingdom, has to do with God's vengeance on sin and all that comes from sin. So this man stands there as example A of what sin does. It wrecks the body. It wrecks everything. Eventually it does. It works through every part of us. It's the result of sin. Jesus doesn't stand back. He doesn't heal him from a distance. That is so significant for this man and for us to realize he engages with vengeance. The sigh that comes out of Jesus is giving his heart to this guy. That's how connected and spent even he is. What a perfect example and forerunner of the ultimate sacrifice that Jesus gives for us because of sin. He engages not just in a sigh, he engages all of his body broken and spilled out on the cross for us. He loses as he engages and gives himself so that we can win. That's the metaphor here. That's what Mark brings us back to. There's far more going on than just hearing and a guy that gets to speak. And then he says, Ephphatha. So Mark translates that for us. It must be Aramaic, Gentile readers, Roman guys, whatever. Those who don't know anything about Aramaic or Jewish tradition, whatever it is, they wouldn't know what he was saying. So he translates that. It's to be opened. Now, a more literal understanding, kind of unpacking that word, would be this. The chain of his tongue was broken, which is far more dramatic and interesting, isn't it, than just be opened. Jesus, as he engages and he lets this out, the chain falls off. Isn't that awesome? He engages on the behalf of the needy, of the special needs that this man has, and he breaks the chain. As Jesus engages with you and me, he does the same thing. The ultimate need is for a Savior. The ultimate need that we all have isn't to be healed temporarily in this life, is to be healed eternally because of what Jesus does. He comes into our lives and he breaks the chain. We're no longer chained to sin and to death and to selfishness and to all those outcomes of sin. We are released. So, this man, how is he released? As Jesus engages, we ought to remember this. We need to be humbled by what only Jesus can do. Jesus performs, and only Jesus performs, the ultimate miracle. This sign, this healing is a stamp of approval of God. He can do this, he can do anything. And then as we think about that, we are humbled to the dirt because he does that for me. And in my rebellion against him, in my refusal to accept his love, in my refusal to go his way, he still meets me at my deepest need and releases me. So we're humbled to the dirt in what he does, but as Jesus engages, as he speaks out, as he groans out his love and healing, what else does he say? Not only are we humbled to the dust, but as this man receives and as we receive, we can respond to those with needs, with special needs, in a way that elevates them. They're no longer just another person who has this particular need. This person is a child of God. This person is a person in the light, in the face, in the eyes of Jesus. No matter what anybody else has thought or said about them, I respond to him or her, and I love them. Elevating their prominence in this new kingdom reality and way of thinking. With an unchained tongue, no matter what my need has been in the past, I know that Jesus has met the need. And I can now go, as Jesus said. What does he say in Acts chapter 1? Go and be my witnesses. What have I witnessed? I've witnessed the ultimate miracle in my life. God loves me and meets me where I'm at. That smashes down everything else. He elevates me to be a child of God. I can tell you about that because he did that to me, with me. You can do the same thing. You are a witness, a personal, living witness to the ultimate miracle. That's what Jesus has done in you. And my tongue is loosed. No matter what my background, no matter what I've been through, I can now speak in praise and in thanks of what God has done with me. And here's the progressive side of that. And I can speak to and for my brother and sister who's still in any kind of darkness. Maybe someone who's been marginalized. Maybe someone who's been ignored. Maybe someone who has a tangible need that up to this point I just haven't really cared about a whole lot. To know the truth in a biblical understanding, to know the truth means I'm also acting on it. You know that? That is absolutely true. Just to know something cognitively, I understand an idea or principle, is not the same as being changed by that principle, so my actions now reflect what has happened. That is knowing. So, brothers and sisters, I'm telling you, there's a whole lot of people who think they know the truth, and they really don't. They really don't, because the actions do not portray that. They don't reveal that there has been a change that only God can bring. So, let's go to number 3 here. And I'm going to give you one at a time. There we go. Number 3, the gospel results in this kind of knowing, all right? In action that is compassionate, practical, sacrificial, and joyful. So let me rip right through those. Special needs today are growing in our society. Let me give you a few points here. Nearly 1/5 of all Americans, more than 54 million men, women, and children, have a physical, sensory, or intellectual disability. Over 75% of special needs adults are without employment. One more. Households containing at least one family member with a mental disability are also marked by the highest poverty rate, 32% within the United States. That's just a beginning point here. We've got to know that, at least in the bigger picture, there are needs that are present, and where is our heart on the issue? Let's think about being sacrificial. If you look at the big picture of economics, of what it takes for our society to meet the needs, there is a growing need that is prevalent, that exists in our society, and the question then becomes, is the church, our believers, are we willing to sacrifice to meet or at least to address some of these needs that are present? So, talked to the cops this past week, talked to them frequently, and we're coming up a number of different things going on even within our town, topics that are coming up. And we talked about group homes, and we talked about the needs of people that are on the street. You don't think about Dakota County as people on the street with needs, and it's there. And if anybody knows about it, it's the cops, because they get called about so-and-so walking down the street in the middle of the night, or so-and-so hanging out in the park that's creepy, and they must be up to something that's no good, or even group homes. Great things happening with the approach to group homes of people with special needs. And so, out of curiosity, I've actually, the cops get 911 calls, they get, check the welfare things, they have to go out and go to the door, knock on it, is everybody here okay, I got this call, things like that. So I'm asking, well, how many times do you go to homes like that? And the response was, every day. Every day there are calls coming from folks who have special needs that cops are called upon. They're like the first line of response and defense in our society for everything. Everything, right? It's no wonder it's so incredibly stressful what they have to respond to. So especially those with special needs, they're the first call, and then they have to come to the door and figure out, okay, what's going on and how to respond. And it's time-consuming and it's exhausting what it is that they're going through. So that makes me begin to think, where's the church? Where is the church? And is there a way that is right there in front of us that maybe we should consider responding or finding a way to respond that we aren't currently doing? Now, all of that requires sacrifice. That was the second point. Compassionate response, sacrificial. We don't always like the sacrifice part. That gets complicated and tricky, time-consuming, expensive, so forth. If we're to extend ministry involvement as a church in any way like what Jesus did, like what we've just looked at, to address the individual, to meet this person at their need, to not make it a show, to have something of value to give and to contribute, if we're going to do that, anything like that, especially with special needs folks, that is going to require a sacrifice commitment like we've never seen before. And with so much time and attention and money going to fun stuff, and I like fun too. It's not like to be a Christ follower, I got to be depressed all the time. But we have a growing level of time and money going to our comfort and our fun, and there's this growing need that's all around us that, for the most part, is under the surface, right? It's kind of hidden. If you dig a little bit on the surface, then it starts to erupt in front of us. Where's the church? Where is Jesus-centered ministry going and directing us in the future? Next thing was practical. We can't change everything or provide for everyone's needs all the time. Practically, what is something that we can do is something that you can do that gets us, that gets you back in the game. If you have anything on your heart, compassionately, yep, there's a need, and willing to sacrifice, then practically, where do we begin? That's the next question. I don't have an answer for this morning, but I would love to engage more with anyone, with everyone. What does Jesus' kind of ministry look like? And the last thing, verse 10, back to Isaiah chapter 35. As gospel kind of ministry with anybody with a special need, as that begins to happen, we see more of what the prophet spoke of. So one last reminder, verse 10, and the ransom of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Man, I love that in light of what Jesus did. As he sighs, our sighing ends at his return, at the establishment of his kingdom forever. When you read that verse, do you read me or do you read us? It's real, especially in our culture, it's real tempting to read the results of the goodness of God and apply it only to me. I get to receive, right? When the prophet speaks, so often, I mean almost every time, it is in relationship to the kingdom reality that affects all of us. The fellowship or the community of those redeemed. As he does the miraculous, and as it works its way into us and through us, everlasting joy shall be on everyone's heads. Everyone, as a part of this kingdom reality from our hearts outward, everyone receives joy. So let me get real point blank. Have you settled for happiness instead of joy? And if there's anything that I see in being the pastor and being involved with our church and church planning and interacting with others, especially in suburban culture, is what we really want is to be happy today. We want the church to meet my happy goal, to make me happy and to make my kids happy with as little commitment and sacrifice as possible. And if I'm happy today, if you've met the one thing I'm looking for as I shop around, if you've met that one thing, I'm good. I can go on and be busy with something else. Now, you may find your one thing for a while, but it's not going to last, in case you haven't figured that one out yet. You may have the one thing met for a while because the pastor is great, or certain ministry programs, they're great. And what happens? Well, things change, and they're not so great anymore, and I need to just continue to shop around to find my one thing. That's what we see predominantly in our culture right now. Just make me happy for a while. If that is your mode, you will never experience joy like what Scripture talks about. Why? Because it's in the way of Jesus, because it involves his humble response to the gospel, because it also involves that knowing Jesus that has that outcome of reaching out in the same way that Jesus does and elevating those around me, especially those with needs. When we do that, we sacrifice, we have to give, you do it however you do it, but you do it in a way that puts Jesus first and others second and me third. When I do that, what do I discover? There is joy unending. That's what we're continually brought back to. Consider it joy to put yourself last so others can be first. To consider it joy to suffer That gospel sting, yeah, it jabs in a little bit because it stabs into my preference and my idolatrous happy worship. It digs into that, right? For a reason. We need to have that cart thrown over to realize Jesus offers so much more than temporary happiness. The joy that can only flow from a life given over to Christ with no strings attached, that is a part of fellowship forever, that's a part of reaching out, that's a part of meeting the need. I hope you're with me on that, and I hope Jesus is talking to you right now. That is one thing that our church, that the church in general, is in desperate need of. To forget about temporary happiness and to reach out in response to the joy that only Jesus gives. Joy is being ransomed back into fellowship with God and others. To receive that joy, it's the path, it's the way of suffering in response to Jesus. Let's pray. Oh, Lord, I hope that's you speaking and not me. Lord Jesus, continue your work to shake things up, to leave us unsettled, to leave us in a state where we're longing for more of you, more of only what you can give, in an abandonment to your will and your way. Jesus, as we sung earlier, you are making beautiful things out of the dust. That's where we all came from, and that's where we're all headed. We've been reminded of that this morning. And as you are creating new things, Lord, give us the eyes that see beyond the barriers, that see beyond those things that have tripped us up and slowed us down. Lord Jesus, give us ears that hear the needs around us. Give us mouths that are willing to speak up for those who have been pushed down, to elevate them in our sight, in the sight of our environment, in the sight, Lord, of you, because you love all of us. Lord Jesus, give us a growing desire to be a part of ministry that is both compassionate and sacrificial and also practical. Give us a new vision to be a part of meeting needs that will glorify you and be a part of your kingdom purpose. Lord, we are grateful for your love and for your presence that transforms. Continue your work so that we can be at and in your presence. In Jesus' name, amen.